Hi, my name is Ken and you're watching Mastering UX. Today we're going to be talking about scaling a UX organization. Okay, in this episode, hopefully, even if you're not a leader, you're going to find something interesting. If you are a leader, of course, there's a lot to understand about the principles on how do you scale a UX organization when there's definitely the acceptance, there's definitely the desire within the organization to grow design and grow as a design organization, even for the entire organization. Well, even if you're not a leader, hopefully what you're going to take away is that there's some key principles that you're going to want to know for how a UX organization can be balanced and how you can be a better team player within that organization. I want to say first off that a lot of the inspiration from this video really comes from a book that's written by Peter Merholtz and Kristen Skinner. That book is called Org Design for Design Orgs. So he has a quote on his website, and I'm going to read a little bit slowly so you can kind of get the gist of it. It says, as design organizations scale, many design leaders are realizing that they're missing a key function, strategic thinking and creative direction, that can make sense of the effort of a design team that is working across many products or distinct parts of a customer journey. I think this is one of the main things that Peter is really advocating for, is really having a way for a design organization to not only have individual hard-hitting UX project teams, but how do you holistically care for all the different teams while also making sure that there's some kind of dedication within the project team so that they can move forward in a way that is both efficient and has some kind of accountability to the project team. The first thing I want to talk to you about is what are the strengths of two different kinds of models when you're kind of staffing a UX organization. So one is a centralized sort of way of doing things, and that is where all the resources are kind of centrally managed, and the UX organization or whatever department really, because these principles apply to any kind of department or organization, it's all centrally allocated. So maybe an organization has marketing needs, they have UX needs, whatever it would be. From a centralized perspective, somebody is kind of sent out according to how we deem the strength of that need. In the dedicated model, you have somebody that's assigned, that's embedded, that is 100% part of that team, and they also do have, a direct manager from their department. There's some strengths on kind of both sides, and the strength of a centralized organization is that there's consistency across the org. There's some advantages in staffing that can be balanced across different projects that are ebbing and flowing at different times. There is the ability to hire more specialists because you realize that you could send maybe the right type of skill at the right time, and even a nuance within a skill set. And also there's a little bit more accountability to your group and looking over the overarching needs of your group. Well, in the dedicated model, there is the matter of you can deliver a consistent service to the team. It's a long-term assignment. And there's also the versatility of having many generalists. Usually when you go with this kind of dedicated model, you tend to hire people that can do a lot of different things. And there's an advantage when things are ebbing and flowing. There's something else that resource can work on. And then the last point is to have sort of this you're just going to be a lot more accountable to your project because you're spending so much more time with your project team. Well, there's also disadvantages on both sides. In the centralized model, there is a tendency that you can get too controlling. It's kind of like a strong communist government where everything's centrally planned, and the centralized organization will decide the wants and needs of the group. I did say that there's the advantage of staffing for the different ebbs and flows, but it still can be quite hard to manage for sometimes all the different project teams. They go onto a period where they're really flowing, and it's really hard to staff it, and it's hard to say who doesn't get the resource that they need. There is a tendency for a centralized organization to sort of be divorced from feeling the real project situation. There may be a lot of pain points and things that are limiting their hindrances for the different project teams. And if you're centralized, sometimes you're sort of divorced from that project reality. The next one is there can be a lack of empathy for the projects. On the dedicated model, there's also some disadvantages. The thing that can happen is the resource that's embedded in the project can end up having times where they're underutilized. They can feel tired and burnt out of working on the same project, kind of desiring to have a little bit more variety. And then there may be a lack of depth and skills because you're hiring a generalist. That generalist may not be a super proficient researcher, or they may not be somebody that you could trust to, do all the corporate icons for a certain kind of flow in the merchandising section of the website. The last point is, in a dedicated model, there's a tendency for the resource to not think about what the other teams are feeling and being on board on the same page, generating consistency and caring for the global interest of UX. So what I thought I'd do is we would kind of build up and kind of show you how we can sort of get the best of both worlds, combining both of these approaches, giving you an approach where it's partially dedicated. There is some dedicated resource that's allocated to the projects, but also there's this concept sort of a ranch that also gets the benefits of a centralized UX organization. If you have many different project teams, you might have a project team that's extra large. And when I say large, I also mean from the perspective of from a UX effort point of view. And all these projects may have different kinds of UX needs. One may be more design heavy, another may be more research heavy. Then you have an extra large project, you have a large project, a medium project, and a small project. And it may be something that you're going to want to pay attention to in your organization is, can you cluster your projects into a kind of a common journey? And so in this case, I kind of bundled up this merchandising kind of journey. And then there's also another kind of set of projects for a resource library journey. And what you're going to find is the needs of those different clusters of projects are going to be the same. And also the necessity to be more consistent is going to be greater when you're kind of bundling these kind of clustering together these journeys. So how would you staff this? Well, as you might have UX resources, and they're kind of just dedicated to the project. You got a UX lead, a visual designer, researcher for this XXL project, and then you got another extra large project. There's a UX lead, a UX researcher, and design system. So these two projects have the same amount of resources, but actually the extra large has a lot more demand. And then there's the same thing. There's a UX lead, a visual designer, and UX lead. Well, one of the things that you got to keep in mind is it doesn't have to be 100% dedicated. In this case, I'm showing you that a visual designer is kind of split between two projects. And even though one project's large, the need for visual design may not be that large. Maybe even the medium project has more need for visual design. And then there's a UX lead that's kind of split between this medium project and the small project. All of this that I'm trying to illustrate is really just something for you to take in the way of principles, not in the way of your projects really would look this way. From a centralized perspective, rather than having one centralized organization, kind of a nickname for this kind of model of there's a team of people that are not directly always assigned to a project, but I call them the ranch, right? Back at the ranch, they're doing something. There's some people that are out in the field, and they're plowing, and they're kind of working on what needs to be worked on. But at the ranch, they also have projects. I'm going to get into that. But this ranch might be a collection of people that are a little bit more specialized. Creative director, you might have front-end developers, you might have designers and researchers. Even within those different kinds of disciplines, you might have a resource that's particularly good at illustrations and icons. And that person might not need to be dedicated to a certain project, but all the projects might get the benefit of this one person who's really good with illustrations, and they can kind of tap him on the shoulder when a certain kind of illustrative need kind of comes up, or when they really need a tough icon that, you know, is just not that easy for a generalist to do. Same thing for a researcher. You might have a researcher that they can do qualitative researcher, but they happen to be a very strong person in quantitative research. And so with this, this person, you know, has the ability to work on a qualitative research project when there's more more flow in a certain kind of project. But they're also this person that can tap on the shoulder because they have this ability to really make a strong case for something, because they're able to really dig deep into quantitative metrics. What I want to show you here is that back at the ranch, you know, it's good for everybody to have accountability. You know, when designers are on a project team, of course, they feel that accountability to the project. But if you're at the ranch, you know, they can be working on a design system. They can be working on a community of excellence for the design thinking. And then this would be a team that maybe does some kind of educating for the whole organization, so that the whole organization can reap the benefits of having designers at the organization, and they can learn to adopt design thinking principles within whatever they're doing, whether they're engineers, whether they're financial experts, accountants, whatever it would be. Those design thinkers can kind of enrich the entire organization. And then you might have a rebranding project, which is going to be a project down the road, but, you know, UX is really doing a lot of the front end homework, research, kind of already getting ramped up for some of the things that are needed, because there's going to be a lot that they're going to want to have set in place in the way of consistency before the developers start working on that project. Okay, so let's put the whole picture together. So once again, you have all your projects down at the bottom. And now what I'm going to want to point your attention to is you're going to want to have your UX in clusters. There's a merchandising cluster, there's a resource library cluster, and those resources don't have to be 100% strict to their project, but there's these commonalities, and there may be even a merchandising UX overseer. I use this word overseer, not in a strict sense, but realizing that just as in their function, what they're doing is they're the connective tissue, both kind of within the projects of merchandising. And keep in mind, there could be 4 or 5 projects in merchandising. There could be 6 projects in the resource library, but they're there to kind of be that connective tissue kind of within a certain kind of customer journey. And they're also there to build the connective tissue by helping the ranch kind of understand the wants and needs of the project teams, and what they see kind of coming down the pike, and limitations in the technology that's going to kind of steer the design direction in different ways. And they're also going to be ones that can kind of bring in the UX kind of global oversight back down to the teams. So these people are not to be just sort of managers that are trying to get you to move faster, but these are people that are going to be sort of the conduits. They're kind of helping things be more connected, seamless, playing together nicely. And so you have those project teams that are going on in the ranch, but they can lend resources. I'm kind of showing you, there's a design system person, there's a design thinking strategist, a researcher, and they're being lent. And some of them maybe even lent out at a 50% capacity, 20% capacity down to the project teams. And then over on the resource library, you have a content strategist and a researcher kind of lending their expertise into those kind of project teams. This kind of shows you that there is an effective pathway to kind of growing the UX organization into something that's larger. Maybe UX has kind of gotten a little bit of clout. There's definitely some maturity within the organization. There's the realization that the organization can be doing things in a little bit more of a design enlightened way. And so with that, it's good to have a strategy, a perspective, and sort of have these goals of what you're trying to balance of the centralized and the dedicated organization. So when I look at this, hopefully you're getting a little bit of both. You're getting the consistency, both, across the UX organization. You're getting the consistency that of service to the design team. You're able to staff by the need, but then you're also able to kind of have definite ones that are long-term assigned to a certain project, and they've give it some continuity. And that doesn't mean that it's absolute. There's still maybe some rotations that kind of happen along the way. You've got your specialists I've kind of shown, and you also got generalists. And generalists, they really help with that ebbing and flowing, because when they're bored, they're able to, they have another skill set that they can also kind of lean into. You have this matter of being fully accountable to UX with the ranch, but then you also got this matter of being accountable to the project. You've got some oversight that's kind of tying things together. I realize not every organization is going to have the budget for this kind of UX organization, but hopefully this just gives you a view of what kind of direction do you want to grow in your UX organization. What would give you the best of sort of both worlds? And I'll be honest, there's never a best of both worlds. There's always a balance, but to be cognizant that there are these kind of two balancing forces of being centralized and being dedicated, and there's kind of pros and cons of both. But can you do it in a way where that you're getting some of the benefits of both on both sides? So that's it. Again, this video comes, the inspiration really comes out of that book, Org for the Design Orgs. Feel free to go ahead and pick up that copy. And if you stuck with me this far, I really want to thank you for that, and I'll see you on the next episode.